Paranormal King Radio Network at ParanormalKing.com.
Welcome to the Paranormal News Insider for the week of June 18th, 2019. And this is episode 396. And this is your host, Dr. Brian D. Parsons. And we are live on the Paranormal King Radio Network at ParanormalKing.com. And yes, I am finally back. I guess some people thought I went on some kind of a sabbatical. I went off in the mountains to become Batman. I don't know. A lot of people said some different things. I'm still here. Still alive and still doing the show. So, yeah, here we go. Was supposed to do a show last week, but I had some last minute things kind of get in the way and I couldn't be here. So we're going to kind of catch you up on last week's news and a couple of other little tidbits here as well. Lots of stories really compacted in tonight. Normally I like to kind of talk a little bit in depth with some of this stuff, but we're going to kind of go through a little bit of this a little quicker than normal, but lots of stuff. We're talking a lot of cryptozoology. I don't know why. I mean, the UFO field seems to be blowing up in the mainstream media right now, and there's a lot of talk about this and about that, and who knows this and who knows that. A lot of that's not changed, but it's good that you can finally hear stuff about UFOs without people, laughing or playing the X-Files theme in the background. So it's finally starting to turn the corner to be something that's a little bit more serious. And what's kind of interesting about that is I was talking to some people who have been around for a while, a lot longer than I have, and they were telling me this is kind of like how it used to be back in the 40s and 50s and parts of the 60s as well. So we're kind of turning the corner, kind of going back to where people are taking this stuff a little bit more seriously, but cryptozoology is right there. I think a lot of people are just falling out from the ghost field, to be honest, and people are just kind of getting involved in a lot of other stuff. But yeah, we're going to talk some alligators, some giant snakes on the loose. We're going to touch on that. I know it's old already, but I want to talk about that Bigfoot FBI thing that happened a couple of weeks ago. Seems like 2 months ago at this point. And also talk about Dr. Jeff Meldrum's weigh-in on the FBI Bigfoot story. And I had a chance to talk to him a couple of weeks ago, and I'll talk about that here in a second. And a couple more Bigfoot stories. Loch Ness Monster. This is going to be a big story. It's had a little teaser article come out, and it didn't really catch much traction. Kind of a little bit of traction, more or less in the British newspapers. Not so much here, but I'm telling you, when this gets published, when this finally comes to fruition, is going to be the biggest story in cryptozoology in quite a while. Yes, I said that, quite a while. And so we'll stay tuned for that one. And we're also going to have the MUFON sighting statistics for May and some other kind of statistics about ghosts and deranged people. Sometimes that goes hand in hand a little bit. And before I get rolling here, I want to remind you, you can find the Paranormal News Insider on paranewsinsider.com. So again, paranewsinsider.com. It's like I paid by the letter or something. I don't know. Anyway, Facebook, Paranews Insider. And you can find at Twitter, at Paranews Insider. And let's see, also on Instagram, you guessed it, Paranews Insider. And let's see, what do we got going on? I really seriously need to update my events page. I'm way, way out of date on this. That's what I get for taking a trip to the mountains to become Batman, I guess. Do have one announcement. As far as my calendar, I got to update it again, but let you know the Summer Haunt Fest 2019, I've been talking about that for a while now. June 21st in Cayuga, Indiana. It's been postponed. Probably going to take place a little later on in the fall. It does sound like an interesting event. And it does, closer you get to fall, you get a lot more events going on. But I don't know, keep your ears peeled, and I'll have more information. When I hear something, I'll pass it on to you guys. June, that's pretty much pretty well. No, take that back. The Haunted America Conference. How can you forget about that? It's a pretty big event up there in Alton, Illinois, June 21st to 22nd. This weekend already. Wow, holy smokes! June is almost over. We're almost officially in summertime. Wow. Let's see. Moving to UFO events, we've got the Alien Con coming up June 21st to the 23rd in Los Angeles, California. It's a pretty big deal. And for me, next Monday, if you're in the area, come on in and hang out a while. I'll be at the Pickaway County Public Library. That's down in Circleville, Ohio. Never heard of it, you say? Well, that's south of Columbus, the state capital. It's about a half hour, 40 minutes, something like that, south of Columbus. So come on out, Pickaway County Public Library. I'm really looking forward to this because I know there's a UFO group that meets in there, and I'll be actually talking about UFOs and some of the big news that's been happening off and on for quite a while. We have... Oh, no, I missed it. Fouke Monster Festival. We have the ECBRO, Virginia Bigfoot Con, coming up June 29th. And that's going to cut it out till July. So really need to update that thing. Oh, yeah. How can I forget? One thing I want to talk about. It's been 3 weeks, a month or whatever, since the beginning of June. The PA Bigfoot Camping Adventure. Just want to touch on this. I know you guys are tired of hearing about this, but... man, oh man, what a great time it was. And unfortunately, I had to bug out of there a little early on Saturday evening before the night hikes took place. I drove home. I was supposed to have an event to go to on Sunday, but that got a little washed out from some of the rain that I had to drive through on the way home. But the PA Bigfoot Camping Adventure, way back when, May 31st to June 2nd of this year, was at the Benner's Meadow Run Campground in Farmington, Pennsylvania. This was the third event, not the third annual, but the third event of the PA Bigfoot Camping Adventure. And it's the biggest one to date. I think about the same amount of speakers. But there's definitely a lot more celebrity guests than what we have ever had, and definitely a lot more people there. So... And I'll tell a little story about this. So I did get in there Friday evening, about 8 o'clock, a little later than I had anticipated due to traffic and construction and everything else. And get into the campground and park my car, and I'm coming out, and I could hear on the PA Eric Altman talking about the night hikes and who's going to go with who. And I basically shut my door, and I heard my name. But I was supposed to lead a night hike, but I wasn't there. So they were going to try to find somebody else to go out with these people. And I'm running through the campground, and granted, it had a lot of rain, and got pretty muddy running through the parking lot. And it wasn't really a parking lot; it was just more or less grass and mud. And ran up there and let them know, "Hey, I'm here. I got to get my boots on." And yes, they did. I'll get to that in a second here. So Friday night, we did go out and had a really good time. Finally got the first year. I hung around the campground. It wasn't a big deal. I didn't mind that. So I got to hang out with the kids and teach them a little bit about Bigfoot, teach them about sign, what to look for, what to listen for, and especially a lot of natural things like owls and fox and what different animals come out at night. It was fun. But it wasn't as fun for me if I was out there in the woods. So the next year I got to go out a little bit and hang out with Steve Coles and some of the other guys, and lots of fun. And this year definitely got to go out on both hikes, 8 o'clock and the midnight, or actually, I guess it was 10 o'clock hike. And our first hike, we went out, split up into a bunch of groups, and we went straight out in the woods and set up, and we knew where Steve was, and I know his equipment. I know when he's doing his calls, and I heard his calls, so I took a position between his calls and where my group was, so it was a little separated from them. They knew where I was at, so I could kind of hear without hearing them talk. And I heard the calls, and all of a sudden, I heard a response call to my left, which would have been east, about a quarter of a mile, and I got excited. And I wondered if Steve's group had heard it or anybody else's group has heard it. So I got on the walkie and said, "Hey, you guys hear that?" And sure enough, one of the groups did hear that response call. But unfortunately, after that, it got eerily quiet. Nothing really happened. But it was really neat to get those people out there. And it's really fun to get to, you kind of forget what you know sometimes. And when people ask you questions, you're like, oh, yeah, this is what I do in this situation, or this is what we're looking for with that. And this isn't really the best time to look for prints. But here's a way you can do that with your flashlight. Different things that we just kind of came and talked to them about. People were talking about mountain lions and different things, and which is kind of one of my favorite areas. And we just really talked a lot about what goes on out there in the woods at night, looking for Bigfoot and whatnot. And yes, as we were leaving for the from the 8 o'clock hike, getting ready to go back and get a new group of people, the game warden did drive through, and he just asked what we were doing. We said, "Hey, we asked us if we're with the Bigfoot event," and we said yes, and he just drove away, which is pretty cool. Apparently, he'd given another group a little bit of a headache and had to call it in, and they said, "Hey, these guys are good. Let them go." So we got free reign of the one of the game. Game areas down there. So lots of interesting stuff has happened in that area. So another one, every single time I've gone out there, I've had something happen. So it's a really interesting location, and it's perfect for that event because that campground that we were at, Farmington, the Benner's Meadow Run, has had Bigfoot sightings in the past, also UFO sightings as well. So a lot of fun to hang out with Steve Coles, Ron Murphy out there in the woods, and just had a tremendous time out there with all these guys. And let's see what else. Celebrity guests were there, and I tell you what, I've kind of bashed the Finding Bigfoot TV show a little bit, but I don't blame the guys that do it. I know it's not their fault. I know they're doing what they want to do, and unfortunately, producers have a way of changing things. And but I tell you what, Cliff Barrickman, if you've ever had the chance to meet the guy, he's the most down-to-earth person you'll ever meet in the Bigfoot field. Really great guy, very knowledgeable, and we talked a lot of different things. And I could talk to that guy all day. He's just an awesome guy, very knowledgeable. Obviously, gets to know a lot of people. And Ken Gerhard, the same way, really down to earth, very humble about everything that he does. And people are like flipping out, like, "Oh my gosh, it's Ken Gerhard! Got to get a picture." And he's like, "I'm just a normal dude with a really cool hat." So he's really down to earth too. And Jeff Meldrum, Dr. Jeff Meldrum, he's a little, he's a little doctorish. We can be that way, but he was a very nice guy to talk to, and just it was really cool to be standing there and seeing all three of these guys all together right there, and to be able to talk with them. And I'll tell you what, the guests loved it as well, and I had a blast. And I could go on, and I could talk the whole hour about that event. But just a tremendous event, and if you weren't there, you missed it. And we're going to move on. And the big news about that, as great as it was, there will not be one next year. But fear not, there will be another one in 2 years. Yes, it's been announced that the PA Bigfoot Camping Adventure will take place in 2021. But it will be kind of a little bit more laid back, which I like. I think this is going to be a really good approach. A little bit more focus on getting smaller groups out there and not as a big of an event. And I'm all for that. I think that's going to be fantastic. And one thing that I suggested was that we rotate some speakers out. So I will not be speaking at that event, but I will be doing a workshop, which is just as cool. So I'll be teaching and training, which is something I love to do. Anyway, we're moving on to cryptid news. And this goes a little back here. So October 16th of last year, seems like the last time I was on the air, that edition of the Paranormal News Insider, which was, I think, 372, if I did the math correctly, I covered a story where the previous week saw a kayaker who found a live alligator in the Waukegan Harbor, which is about 40 miles north of Chicago. Unfortunately, or I guess maybe fortunately for the kayaker, not fortunate for the alligator, the mouth of the alligator was taped shut. And I also talked about that same night. I talked about two separate findings of alligators on the same day in Kansas City, Kansas, of all places, out in the middle of nowhere. I'm sorry if you live there, but it is pretty much the middle of nowhere, from what I saw. Well, this week, or I should say probably last week, we were looking at the southwestern portion of Pennsylvania, specifically the Pittsburgh area. So back on May 18th, a 3-foot-long alligator was discovered at the Southside Riverfront Park, which is along the Monongahela River, locally known as the Mon, because it's very difficult to pronounce. Monongahela. I screw it up too, so that's why we just call it the Mon. Monongahela. Anyway, last week on June 6th, so 2 weeks ago now, a 5 to 6 foot long alligator, which is pretty darn big. I mean, that's not as big as they get, but 5 to 6 foot long alligator. I don't know about you. If I'm walking down the street and I see even a 5 foot long alligator, I'm flipping out because I live in Ohio. I would never expect that. But Pittsburgh, I wouldn't expect that either. See, now I can say it though. Monongahela. It's easy. It rolls off the tongue. It's different when you read it. So the 5 to 6 foot long alligator was discovered by a dog walker. And I can just see that. Guys walking his little, I don't know what they are, like Pomeranian, little puff dog, looks like a rat on a leash kind of dog. And, it's all tough and it's barking at all the big dogs. And, hey, I own this neighborhood. Then you see a 6 foot alligator. I bet that thing crawled right up that guy's leg. Yeah, walking his dog. And he saw a 6 foot long alligator. Wow. It makes you think about that. You go out, you do your routine, you do the stuff you normally do. You never think you're going to walk into that, but you never know. Yikes. So this was in a residential area of the Beachview neighborhood, which is just south of downtown Pittsburgh and about 3 miles southwest of the May 18th discovery, which I found a little odd. Saturday, June 8th, police responded to the 300 block of East Agnew Street in the Carrick neighborhood, which is about 2 miles southeast of the last sighting and about 2 miles south of the May 18th find. That's what I said when I read that, or when I figured it out, I should say. This latest alligator, he's a baby, only 2 feet long. Small guy. Still would scare most people, I would think. Now, authorities believe the first 2 alligators discovered were discarded pets, which makes sense. And they also believe that the 3 discoveries were not related. Their words, not mine, because I'm willing to believe that all 3 of these, obviously they were released or allowed to escape, but I think they might have been by the same person and are related. And I'll give you, I did a little work here. Yes, I do a little work on the side for these stories and kind of plotted these on a map. So I'm going to throw these in the chat room for you, and you can check out this little map I created of the 3 sightings. So you can see on the top there, sighting number 1, May 18th, and then sighting 2, June 6th, and then sighting number 3, 3/8. And so they're all about 2 miles apart. So it's cumulative, what you're seeing from 2, 4, and 6 miles. So it's actually 3 square mile area where these 3 alligators were discovered. It's a pretty small area. Granted, there's a lot of homes in those areas, so you never know. Could be more than one person, but it seems a little odd to me. Seems a little strange. 3 square mile area. I think that's too convenient to be a coincidence, in my opinion. Well, I was going to run that story last week, like I said, but I was unable to do the show. But this week, I found out that I was possibly right. Pittsburgh police had investigated a home after the June 6th incident with the escaped 5-foot-long alligator. The alligator had actually torn through a screen door. So that's all that was stopping this thing, a screen door. I mean, even Miami Vice, they kept him on a big chain. I mean, my goodness. Elvis was his name, if you're thinking. So it went through a screen door and dropped about 10 feet to be able to scurry off down the street. So on Tuesday, June 11th, the home of Mark McGowan was raided, and 32 animals were removed, with at least one of them deceased. Of these animals, 3 were alligators, with one having a pre-existing neck injury, and there was also 2 Burmese pythons. And I ended up, so much of this stuff had just kind of was unraveling so fast. I ended up just writing a blog about it, just to kind of get a little bit of that information out, because I hadn't seen anybody really write about all of it together unless you're living in Pittsburgh, or that Pittsburgh area. So I put a blog out through paranewsinsider.com, and you'll find the blog link up there at the top, and you can check out the entire story, pretty much mostly what I just read to you, along with the map and everything else. But you're thinking they can't live up here at all. Well, they can, but they don't make it in the harsh winters, the cold winters. But alligator discoveries, on the other hand, in the north, they're not that uncommon. So there's a guy named Alligator Bob Baversha of the Chicago Herpetological Society, and he's rescued hundreds of alligators in the wild in the Midwest over the years. So most of those escaped or released, but hundreds of these guys creeping around. Now, alligators are obviously known to live in Florida and southern Georgia, but can also range along southern Texas into Mexico, all of Louisiana, part of southeast Oklahoma, southwest Arkansas. Alligators also live, a lot of people don't even know this, but they also live in the eastern part of South and even North Carolina. And even bigger than that, they even live in a swamp area known as the Great Dismal Swamp that extends into Virginia. Yes, Virginia. So alligators live in Virginia, just south of Norfolk, Virginia. You'd never think you'd see it there, but there they are. Granted, while prolonged cold can kill them, it's not impossible for them to survive in cold areas for short periods of time, and they've actually been observed frozen in ice with their snouts out of the ice, so they can at least breathe, and they don't want to eat because the cold severely slows their eating, and their energy levels kind of drop too. So you could probably pretty much get on one and ride it around the ice if you wanted to. I don't recommend that, but you might be able to do that. Don't do it just because I said you could, but if you find an alligator on the ice, that would be pretty cool anyway. Just send pictures. Don't touch it. So I don't know. It's just interesting, but more than likely the ones in Pittsburgh obviously were released, and we've heard about alligators in the sewers and all that stuff. Maybe. What about snakes? Do you guys remember Wessie the snake? Maybe you don't. It's a long time ago now. I didn't realize it was so long ago. But Wessie the snake was the #1 paranormal news story of 2016. Well, #1 according to me anyway. It was a story that broke in June and lasted all summer long despite not much in the way of evidence of Wessie's continued existence. Wessie was a giant anaconda that managed to live in a small river in Maine near Portland for one summer. But more than likely, like I mentioned with the alligators, succumbed to cold weather. No evidence was ever found of Wessie after, obviously after the winter. That is, unless you believe his Twitter feed that he had going on and that he actually flew to Florida in the interim. Well, West Virginia is getting in on the missing big snake storyline this year with the Morgantown snake rumored to be over 15 feet long and apparently missing. Excuse me, I've lost my 15-foot long snake. Has anyone seen it? Wow. The snake escaped from its enclosure back on May 30th, and police actually had a visual for a moment. I don't know how you can't catch up to a 15-foot snake, but people were obviously trying to catch it, and they realized how big this thing was and running for their lives. But the snake has been missing since. No reports, and just like Wessie, this lack of sightings, this lack of reports, actually driven the fame, well, probably, and the nerves of the people up in the area as well. You know, when somebody mentioned that the Mothman Festival is coming soon, geez, West Virginia's also got the Flatwoods Monster, and now they got the Morgantown Snake, or Morgantown Monster, whatever they're going to end up calling it. I don't know. It's kind of sad. I heard Lauren Coleman talking about it. They're not doing a Wessie event this year. And in my backyard here, we have the Peninsula Python. A very similar story. It escaped from a train, from a traveling zoo, and was supposedly in the what's now a national forest area. And nobody could find that one either. And so they had a parade for it every year. They've only been doing the parade for, I think, about 7 or 8 years. But now, this year, they said no more. No parade for the Peninsula Python. So it's pretty sad. Maybe they'll have one for the Morgantown Snake. And maybe we haven't heard of the last of the Morgantown Snake, because it's hopefully eventually going to get pretty hot. So if that snake is still around and it gets hot, he's going to be eating things. Let's just keep it right there for now. Now, Bigfoot, yes, the king of cryptozoology here in North America, has been in the news nearly every week, it seems like, here on the Paranormal News Insider. But most of these stories really didn't get too much publicity outside of the paranormal, with the exception of that Indian Army's social media announcement that they had found a Yeti, which wasn't true. When you hear the phrase FBI files released, obviously we all tend to think of UFOs, not Bigfoot. But as you probably heard or read a couple of weeks ago, the story of a Bigfoot investigation by the FBI, finally released by the government agency, sent the internet into a tizzy as a number of headlines splashed across the web in what is by far the biggest Bigfoot story of 2019, I would think. And some of the headlines read, quote, "Bigfoot was investigated by the FBI. Here's what they found," unquote. That was for the History Channel's take on the story. And, quote, "The FBI once helped in the hunt for Bigfoot," unquote, said the New York Times. CBS News had a headline that read, quote, "New documents reveal FBI investigated Bigfoot in the 1970s," unquote. Now, many other stories focused on the fact that the FBI just released information it had gathered about Bigfoot. But is this story really about the FBI being involved in the search for Bigfoot? I mean, yeah, we have the Men in Black. I mean, what do these guys wear? Brown? Camo? I don't know. The Center for Inquiry, the CFI, which is a skeptical organization, released its own story on the topic, with Benjamin Radford cutting through the Bigfoot hair to look at just what happened and if it was really a big deal as everyone is making it out to be. So here are the facts. Back on November 24th, 1976, Peter Byrne, who was the director for the Bigfoot Information Center and Exhibition, wrote the FBI asking to see if they would analyze hairs that he discovered. He did receive a letter a couple of weeks later on December 15th, 1976, from J. Cochran Jr., stated in part, quote, "The FBI laboratory conducts examinations primarily of physical evidence for law enforcement agencies in connection with criminal investigations, occasionally on a case-by-case basis. In the interest of research and scientific inquiry, we make it an exception to this general policy. With this understanding, we will examine the hairs and tissue mentioned in your letter," unquote. Byrne was then given the address to the FBI laboratory in Washington, D.C., And on February 24th, 1977, Howard Curtis, a colleague of Burns, received a letter from the FBI which detailed the examination of the hairs sent in and what the results were. The letter mentioned how the hairs were examined by their root structure, cuticle thickness, as well as compared to known samples under a comparison microscope. Now, known samples of known animals, that is, because if you don't have any knowledge of a Bigfoot, there's really nothing to copy it to, or compare it to, I should say. So they just compared it to known animals to see how different it was. And the conclusion was that the hairs belonged to an animal from the deer family origin. So no, the FBI did not investigate Bigfoot. It didn't send guys out in suits in the woods to look for a creature or do any other investigative work looking for the big hairy guy, despite the 1970s really being the biggest decade for stories and sightings. I mean, he was even on the $6 Million Man. That's pretty cool. Could this now lead to more of a conspiracy theory angle with Bigfoot investigators? Kind of like we see in the UFO field? I don't know. I don't think so. It seems like the story came and went. People got excited, and then they moved on. And it also, unfortunately, gets us no closer to discovering the creature. Now, in a separate story, kind of related to this, and I mentioned Dr. Jeff Meldrum, who was at the Bigfoot Camp, PA Bigfoot Camping Adventure over the weekend, the beginning of June, stated that this latest story is just misdirection by the FBI. Meldrum stated that he could tell those were not primate hairs just from the black and white photographs that were shared with the recently released FBI files. They did look a little weird. Meldrum feels this latest story does not do the collection of a lot of other evidence much justice. Of this, Meldrum was quoted in an article published by the Spokesman, which is located in Spokane, Washington, where he said, quote, "Skeptics love it, but it diverts attention away from the more compelling evidence, like the hairs that I've mentioned, and all the other evidence, the footprint evidence, the vocalizations, the photographic evidence, the continuing, ongoing eyewitness accounts by credible, reliable, less impressionable witnesses," unquote. Now, one thing he mentions in the article is hair he has in his collection, which has not shown signs of being cut. Most people get their hair cut every now and again, right? I would think, I hope. Most of us do. I've seen a few that maybe don't. But these hairs show no signs of getting cut, and are definitely of primate origin. The other issue is that getting hairs properly tested in this day and age is pretty difficult. You wouldn't think it'd be as hard because there's probably more labs. Stuff is probably cheaper. But you have academia, and they shun this subject pretty much all but Dr. Jeff Meldrum. There's a few other people out there, but not many people you can really trust, or not many people that would want to look at this evidence. If you told them what you thought it was, I mean, obviously you could probably send stuff in anonymously, or maybe not anonymous, but just say, hey, I found this. I want to figure out what this belongs to. And maybe, if you don't use the B word or the S word, well, that sounds bad. I mean, Bigfoot or Sasquatch, if you don't use those words, then maybe they'll look at it. But academia, they pretty much shun the subject. They're not really willing to take the risk to put their name on the line, to hurt their credibility or their livelihood, which is pretty much what it comes down to nowadays. And I do have a hyperlink. So we have a question in the chat room about pictures. And I will put the link to the story in there. And I believe the story does have photos. I don't have those copied to share, to show. But I'm pretty sure that one does. I have the pictures that I mentioned. Maybe not. Maybe it doesn't. Well, I'll find those. We'll get those. We'll get those out there. And so I don't know. It's kind of a, pretty much you're gonna have to find and cut off a leg at this point. It's the only way to really prove Bigfoot, unfortunately. It's gonna have to be Harry and Henderson style. Somebody hitting this thing in the woods and strapping it to their car and bringing it into a deer tag station. Something like that is going to have to happen, unfortunately, but that's going to create all kinds of other problems. We've heard about people having shooting Bigfoot and taking different parts of bodies, but nothing has ever come to that, come to fruition. And it's the old thing of people get hit by cars, dogs get hit by cars, most wild animals get hit by cars. This is how we know they're around. Even mountain lions, who are very cunning and stealthy, get hit by cars. Talk about the one that crossed 1,500 miles from the Black Hills of South Dakota all the way almost to New York City, to a city in Connecticut, where it unfortunately got hit by a woman on an SUV. So, these things get hit, and unfortunately, I think that's what's going to take. We need body parts. Hair isn't going to do it, but it's a start. It's a start, but it's a stretch to say that we can just take people's sightings. People misinterpret things all the time. We got to have some physical evidence. Unfortunately, it's going to take that. But one pretty cool thing is you want to learn a little bit more about the science side of Bigfoot, looking for DNA, looking for hair samples, all those other things, especially from Dr. Jeff Meldrum. Highly recommend his book, Sasquatch Legend Meets Science. Now, this has been on my need-to-buy list for quite a long time. Probably pretty embarrassing to say how long I've wanted this book. And I kept thinking, well, when I bump into him, I'll get it from him. And I never bumped into him until now. So I finally got the book and pretty much read most of it already in the last 3 weeks. So it's an excellent book. Highly recommend it. It's worth it. Go out and get it. So one last story here on Bigfoot, which I did put a link out on Facebook and Twitter back on June 4th. Now, this centers on Bigfoot helping out on a big issue in Oregon, forest fires. Now, you may be saying, well, wait a minute. They already have a spokesman for that. Some dude in a hat, right? Some bear? Yes, Smokey Bear is the big name in helping spread the message that only you can prevent forest fires, but perhaps Smokey is getting a little too old for this line of work, or maybe Bigfoot can appeal to more people. Maybe the younger generation needs the Bigfoot. So the Oregon State Fire Marshal has decided to use Bigfoot as a spokesperson to help spread fire awareness. Jim Walker, the Oregon State Fire Marshal, says of this new campaign, quote, wildfires can easily be ignited by backyard burning, an unattended campfire, a hot car on tall, dry grass, or from dragging tow chains, and they spread fast. We hope our Bigfoot campaign will draw attention and create a bigger footprint of wildfire prevention efforts around the state, unquote. You get it? A bigger footprint? I thought you did. It's kind of my kind of joke right there. New posters and a hashtag of Believe in Fire Safety will accompany this campaign. And some of these posters say Believe in Fire Safety. And to protect Bigfoot will lead Bigfoot will lead this campaign. So it's almost like the X-Files kind of thing. I don't know. It's kind of weird here. Got another picture. Got some of the posters here. I'll show y'all the Oregon Bigfoot campaign. Pretty cool. A couple of different posters here of the big guy. Believe in fire safety, and he's snuffing out some fire. I think that's pretty cool. Prevent wildfires. Leave only footprints. And protecting Bigfoot. Don't let wildlife be the one that got away. And Bigfoot's fishing down there. Looks like Mount Rainier. That's in Washington, though. Yeah. Set the state on fire. Anyway, moving right along. And, been excited to talk about this story for I don't know how long. Well, for a year. One of the most anticipated stories I've ever covered is now leaking a few spoilers. And we just got done talking about DNA evidence for Bigfoot. And, that proving any kind of creature, you're going to need, this creature's never been, seen or discovered. Unfortunately, sometimes in these cases, pictures are not enough, especially for a hair-covered wild man. It's probably not going to be enough. So we need DNA. Last year, Professor Neil Gemmell led the search for DNA evidence of Loch Ness, that's in Scotland, to finally prove one way or the other that the Loch Ness monster either exists or is a thing of folklore, once and for all. Gemmell and his University of Otago crew took samples of Loch Ness at various depths in different places in the body of water to capture as many DNA samples as possible in an effort to catalog the life that inhabits the loch, everything from fish to plants. Now, the bits of DNA didn't just come from the water, they also came from feathers, scales, fur, as well as waste. Animal waste. What other kind of waste is there? Okay, I guess there's other waste. But the project is a few months behind schedule, as it was originally intended to go public in January of this year, but has recently popped up with the headlines, I should say, that kind of point toward what they've said is, quote, surprises aplenty, unquote. I've seen that a couple of times. That have been discovered during this DNA testing phase. This has led to some websites, such as the Mirror, to post headlines such as, quote, Loch Ness monster might be real as scientists make surprising discovery, unquote. They sound just like that. Just like that. Loch Ness monster might be real. The team hopes to announce their finding very soon, but right now are rechecking some of the results, although the most of the analysis is complete. Now, their intended target was actually July, but now it's looking as if September is going to be the date where the results will finally go public. And, the team was delayed for a couple of reasons. Of the findings, Professor Gemmell said, quote, is there really anything deeply mysterious? It depends what you believe. Is there anything startling? There are a few things that are a bit surprising. What we'll have achieved is what we set out to do, which is document the biodiversity of Loch Ness in June of 2018 in some level of detail. We've tested each one of the main monster hypotheses, and if 3 of them we can probably say aren't right, and one of them might be. We'll never disprove that there's a monster, as we said from the beginning. If we find no evidence of the monster, that doesn't prove anything. All we can do is describe what we found, unquote. So that's kind of where a lot of people get all excited, that 3 of the main monster hypotheses aren't right, but one of them might be. And I could speculate. Alligator gar. I could speculate. Maybe. We'll see. But again, the results are set to be delivered to the public more likely in September. And I mentioned there was a couple of reasons for the delay. Well, one of the reasons for the delay was the retesting, but Gemmell also admitted that a failed attempt at a television documentary was also a reason for the lengthy delay. That's what you get. That's what you get for trying to get something on TV. I mean, we'll see if that actually hurt this process or not. I don't think it's going to hurt it. Either way, the stuff is going to come out, and we're going to see it, and it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be probably one of the biggest stories of the year, if not the year. We'll see. I've got my hopes kind of high on this, but we'll see just how big ultimately this is going to be. But I do think that it's going to be, if not the top story, probably one of the 2 or 3 top stories of the year. Definitely. Trying to find an answer here. Project Blue Book. When is that going to restart? I don't think it's going to start. If it does, it's probably not going to start until next year again, because it started in January of this year. I don't think it's going to pop up again this fall. I've not heard anything. I don't know if they've announced that, but went from January to March. And then they renewed it a little bit after that, I think. So we'll see. We'll see. Looking forward to that. It's going to be interesting. I don't know how they're going to change all that, but anyway. There was also, not really going to talk about it. We'll see how this develops, but Ogopogo, the Canadian Nessie in Lake Okanagan up there in British Columbia. There's been another sighting of that as well. Well, a really weird sighting. It's on YouTube. Trust everything you see on YouTube, I guess, right? But this guy is pretty freaked out about this, and he thinks it's the real deal. And this story just came out yesterday, and I wasn't really going to throw it in here, but I figured I'd give it a mention. And again, like I said, we'll see what happens if this evolves in any way, shape, or form. So I'm going to jump into UFO news, and like I said, UFO news is really getting out there. It's becoming a lot easier to watch on TV because they don't make fun of it. They don't start snickering and laughing and playing the X-Files theme and just making a joke out of it now. So it's starting to become a little bit more, I guess, mainstream, for lack of a better term here. And we'll see if that continues, if it continues to be the big story that it's been. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the stuff that's come out is just a big ploy for those letter S's with those 2 vertical lines through it for a certain company that's led by a guy who's a band leader from that Blink 182 thing. So I don't know. I think they've released some stuff here prior to their TV show debut, trying to get some attention, trying to get some fundage, trying to get some money. I mean, you can't help. I mean, you can't help but fully understand that. I mean, all these things, they're companies, they're businesses. And one business that's been around for quite a while is MUFON, the UFO business that is. MUFON stands for the Mutual UFO Network. And they've been around for a while. And they've been trying to keep it going. And unfortunately, they've had some issues lately. Lost a good chunk of some of their upper management, I guess you'd say, over some internal political issues. And they've not been able to retain membership. And it's kind of a mess. And I feel bad because I really like what MUFON does and how they're trying to do things, at least. Maybe not how things are playing out state to state. I think there's a huge gap between one state and the next, the way things are investigated and reported and followed up on. But what can he ask for? I mean, I could ask for a lot, but I mean, what can he ask for from a investigation thing like this that's stretched all over the country, all over the world, really? And what they promote, what they talk about is great. When you read, I do have their Field Investigators Manual, which is how I learned how to approach UFO cases. I mean, I don't want to make light of them or make fun of them, but it's phenomenal. And if the way they do these processes, unfortunately, once you anoint a field investigator, you don't know what direction they're going in, and sometimes they don't follow, I think, what they preach. And it's unfortunate. There's not a whole lot of ability to follow up with this kind of stuff when people are volunteering for these things. And, when you start hurting for investigators, sometimes you kind of reach in the bottom of the bag. I'm just going to say it. And I've seen some of the reporting. I've seen some of their investigations. I would say 90% of them are very, 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 very good. Most of them are top notch, but there are a few that I think spoil it. But I think overall, it's a fantastic organization for as large as it is to do what they do. You can't beat it. I mean, the ghost field has nothing close. Cryptozoology, same deal. A bunch of scattered organizations all over the place that are competing against each other, burning each other's woods down. Ghost people are fighting in the streets, stabbing each other in the eye with EMF detectors. I don't know what they're doing, but nobody's getting along. There is no paranormal unity out there, which is kind of a joke anyway to think about. But at least the UFO field has some organization to it. And they've, MUFON is just another organization, a long line of other organizations that have come and gone before them. MUFON is reaching kind of their golden age here, 50 years. So they must be doing something right. And they've survived an era, which is the 80s, when most of these other groups folded. So the way they've decided to do things, which was tried and tested prior to them going out and doing this, they realized this is the best way to do it. So they're doing the best they can with what they have, and you can't blame them for that. Anyway, I just wonder about, again, all this mainstream talk about UFOs and in the media. How is it going to affect MUFON? Is it going to get more people involved? Granted, again, we have the To These Stars Academy, which is kind of competing a little bit, but they've not reached out to create teams or anything like that yet that I've seen. But I wonder if that's in the works. Just wonder. And we'll see what happens between those two organizations. But anyway, last May, MUFON released their reports from last May for their sighting statistics. And they had a total of 678 worldwide reports and 446 from the United States. In 2017, it was 624 total and 470 from the United States in May. And 2016 had 545 total and 395 in the United States. So I messed something up there. That's not right. Last year, I should say, last May, 2017 had 678, 446, or 2018. I'm sorry, 2018. What year am I in? What year are we in? Who's president? I don't know. 678, 446 for 2018. 2017 was 624 and 470. And 2016 was 545 and 395. It's all messed up here on my report. I got to fix that. So this year, MUFON had a total of 680 worldwide reports, which is kind of in line with last year. And it's actually the single largest month so far of 2019. 680. And of that 680, 481 came from the United States. Again, this is the highest mark to date in 2019 as well. So the second highest reporting country was the United Kingdom with only 66. Still pretty good, though. Canada with 38. Australia had 15. South Korea had 10. And Spain and France each had 4 each. 38 other countries had reports of 22 of those, only turning in 1 report. And, a lot of these other countries, they do have UFO reporting agencies, local ones. They do have other investigation teams. So, MUFON doesn't have a stronghold as they do here in the United States. Now, of the 481 reports in the United States, California was the leader with 42 reports. And again, they're the number 1 state of population, so they should be number 1 by statistics. Florida was second with 34. Michigan had 27. Texas had 24. Ohio had 23. Arizona had 22. Washington State had 21. New York had 19. Kentucky, Oregon, Colorado had 14 reports each. New Mexico and Minnesota had 13 each. Alabama and Illinois had 12 reports each. Georgia and Pennsylvania had 11, and Massachusetts, Wisconsin, and Tennessee had 10 reports each. There was 27 other states that turned in a report, with 3 only turning in 1 report. And as I do every month, I do kind of per capita, and use California as kind of the entry point. So California, being number one in state population, had a whopping 42 cases, but it translates to a 0.106 per capita. So that's per 100,000 people. 0.106, not even one in 100,000 people. Alaska, the 48th state in population, had 2 sightings, just 2, but their per capita was 0.271. West Virginia had, they're in number 38 in state ranking. They had 5 sightings for a 0.277 per capita. Washington, we mentioned them, they had 21 sightings. They're 13th in state population. That puts them at a 0.279 per capita. Arizona, 14th in state population. I mentioned them as well. 22 sightings, 0.307. And Kentucky, 26th in state population, 14 sightings, turned in a 0.313. State of Oregon, 27th in state population, had 14 sightings. That translates to a 0.334 per capita. And Maine, 42nd in state population, they had only 5 sightings, but a 0.374 per capita. Montana, 43rd in state population, 5 sightings, 0.471. And Wyoming, dead last, 50th in state population. I think there's more cows in Wyoming than people. 3 sightings, 0.519. So just over 1 in 200,000 people reported a UFO. So it's pretty cool. And again, this is MUFON's 50th anniversary, and their 2019 International UFO Symposium takes place July 26th through the 28th in Irvine, California, with tickets still for sale. The last time I saw anyway. Yep. And let's see, one last story. I'll make it quick here for you, and you guys can scamper off into the night. But I always love polls, and YouGov is that's the poll place to go. And I don't know, lately I've just been getting sucked into this where I'm going on there and I'm looking at stuff and reading about different subject matters. It's really interesting. You wouldn't think some of this stuff, but the way some people vote on things. So the poll site YouGov recently asked, are you more scared of the supernatural, which they define as demons and ghosts, or the deranged, which they defined as serial killers and cultists? Well, I can tell you I'm more afraid of serial killers and cultists. Probably serial killers, I don't know. Probably cultists more. They could do more damage. Respondents replied with nearly half, 48%, I guess is nearly half, saying they were more afraid of deranged people. Only 48%. Thought it would be a lot higher than that. Only 5% responded saying they were more afraid of the supernatural. Unless you're talking about the TV show. It does get a little scary. 24% said they are not afraid of either. So either supernatural or the deranged. Takes some pretty big guts to say that. 24%. And 10% said, I don't know. They didn't vote. They didn't know. They didn't know what to vote. They didn't know how they felt. Breaking down the results, I kind of peeked through that to see if there was any kind of difference with political affiliation or age, or really nothing jumped out, although it seemed older people were a little less afraid of ghosts than the younger respondents. I guess you get a little older, you get a little closer, you start to respect it. I don't know if that's the answer. They don't really tell you that. So I'm not surprised, but this poll there is no surprises here. Like I've always said, and I think most people agree that I'm more afraid of the living than the dead. And most ghost investigators will tell you the same thing. Even though most are unpredictable, a ghost is more than likely not going to lock you in the basement of their house, despite what you might see on television. Again, supernatural. The only thing of concern here is the word supernatural. To me, I'm very cautious not to use that. To a lot of people, supernatural and paranormal are synonyms. It's the same thing. But to me, kind of by more strict definition, supernatural really points more towards religious themes, such as miracles and, again, demons and angels and all those things that are related to that. The more religious kind of overtones or undertones or tones in general. But traditional ghosts, to me, is a little bit different. But I get it. To ask the question, to get people involved in that poll, you gotta draw them in somehow. So you gotta get them interested. You gotta get something, keywords to get people to want to vote for that. And I'll throw in the chat room a little poll there. There it is. It's kind of interesting. So question in the chat room, how many abductions? So I think you're asking about MUFON. So MUFON doesn't really track, or at least if they do track, they don't really talk about abductions. Most people don't report directly to websites about abductions. And abductions really, it's not really as prevalent as it used to be. Let's say even the early 90s, actually, I did 3 cases of abductions. But I've not heard of anybody or anything lately, pretty much anywhere. It's almost like it's over. It's over. I don't know. And speaking of over, I don't know how I crammed 3 weeks worth of information into 1 hour, but we did it. We made it. And we're at the end. And be sure tonight when you go to the bathroom that you lift up the lid to the toilet and you look inside. Make sure there's no alligators or 15-foot anacondas curled up inside of there. You never know. It could happen. So sleep tight. And if you're taking your dog out for a walk tonight, look both ways. Might not want to walk down the street. Call an Uber or a cab. And I'll see you next week. But for now, keep your eyes in the skies, your ears in the woods, the hair standing on the back of your neck, and always keep your mind slightly ajar. And above all else, don't stop believing. For the Paranormal News Insider, this is Dr. Brian D. Parsons reporting